Hello and welcome to the Bubbling Up podcast, a show about the people and places of Hot Springs, South Dakota, and the Southern Black Hills. I'm your host, Justin Gosman, and this show is coordinated through the Hot Springs Area Chamber of Commerce. Bubble up. The Cambridge Dictionary defines bubble up as to rise to the surface or to become obvious. And that's why this show came about. I want the stories behind our fascinating small South Dakota town to rise to the surface and be heard. Hot Springs, South Dakota, population 3,460 today, is a community in the southwestern corner of South Dakota, about 50 miles south of Mount Rushmore. Founded in 1890, we got our name from, you guessed it, naturally warm mineral springs that bubble up from underground. Hot Springs was and remains today the home of the oldest commercial attraction in the Black Hills, Evans Plunge Mineral Springs, and is also home to numerous attractions and activities. The Mammoth Site, an active paleontological dig site that has provided the scientific world the largest collection of mammoth bones in North America. Wind Cave National Park, currently the 7th longest mapped cave in the world and a significant sacred site in the Lakota creation story, is mere minutes north of Hot Springs. The Black Hills Wild Horse Sanctuary is here, founded by conservationist Dayton Hyde, and man-made reservoirs like Angostura State Recreation Area draw people from around the country. Hot Springs' long and storied history has deep connections to the early settling of the Dakotas. Unlike many other mining towns of the Black Hills, with far more famous names like Custer and Deadwood, Hot Springs was first and foremost a luxury destination, a legacy that has proven both an inspiration and a challenge for countless generations. And Hot Springs has a proud, yet less well-known, parallel history as the home of the South Dakota State Veterans Home and the Battle Mountain Sanitarium National Historic Landmark, today the home of the VA Black Hills Healthcare Center. Hot Springs earned in 2014 the title of the Veterans Town of South Dakota from the South Dakota State Legislature. With so broad a scope for such a small town, it can be difficult to pinpoint what exactly it is about Hot Springs that makes it so magical, I guess is the word, for people who visit, move, or grow up here. In this opening alone, we've covered so much and still haven't even talked about the sandstone architecture of many of our buildings, including our 4-story Pioneer Museum, or the fact that Badger Clark, the cowboy poet known for the poem A Cowboy's Prayer, lived and was buried here in Hot Springs. There are art galleries, historic theaters, mom-and-pop specialty shops, agriculture, and so much more. The stories seem endless, and it's my hope that this show will enlighten not only the fellow residents of and potential visitors to Hot Springs as to the intriguing history of our community, but also to its ongoing inner workings today, the stories behind our local businesses and nonprofit organizations and events, the voices that make a community what it is, and that are working to make it what it can be. I hope you'll join me on this journey. Close your eyes. Think of a small town Christmas. What does it look like to you? Most people would imagine something off of a Hallmark card. Regal-looking businesses decorated with displays of reindeer and Santa. The snow-covered steeple of a church. Evergreen wreaths wrapped in red bows hung from street lamps. When the snow falls thick and fluffy in early December, and by February it'll be the crunchy hard kind, Christmas in Hot Springs could sometimes be described as stepping into a Frank Capra film. But there's something different that sets Hot Springs apart. If you look over the handrails that line the 1/3 mile stretch of downtown Hot Springs from the Evans apartment building, a looming sandstone structure originally built as a luxury hotel by businessman Fred Evans, down to the Hot Springs Theater, a movie theater built in the 1920s in an Art Deco style of the era, you can peer over into Fall River, a narrow, winding stream that spans the entire length of town. What surprises visitors to Hot Springs in the winter is that Fall River does not freeze. It is fed largely by the naturally warm mineral springs in the northern areas of town, and so when it's cold outside, steam rises up from the river. On particularly frosty weekend mornings in late November, sometimes the steam lingers on the grass and the tree branches along the banks of the river and turns them crystalline, pure white. But this weekend is something special. For over 41 years, Hot Springs has played host to the Christmas in the Hills celebration, an event that starts Friday night with a parade of lights, caroling, and appearances from Santa and Mrs. Claus, and it continues into Saturday with a day-long marketplace of handmade goods followed by a free concert in the evening, all at the Mueller Civic Center. And on Sunday, the ladies of the Shakespeare Club hold their high tea at Pine Hills, one of the local retirement communities. Every year, the community looks forward to this special event with anticipation, because it evokes a sense of community pride. and shared appreciation for each other as well as the holiday spirit. But for anyone who's organized an event with so many moving parts, you know it doesn't happen overnight, nor by the work of any one person. Leading the charge of Christmas in the Hills is the Christmas in the Hills Committee, a self-standing organization that's supported by, but not officially part of, either the municipal city or the Chamber of Commerce. At the head of the committee, as one of the co-chairs, is Karen Meston, a face familiar to many people in Hot Springs, especially those who have attended the latest blockbusters at the Hot Springs Theater, where she is one of the co-owners of the theater since its reopening last year. So we're here to talk with Karen a little bit about Christmas in the Hills, the theater, and her story. So Karen, thank you for sitting down with me. And
happy to do it.
You're on the inaugural episode of the podcast, and we're glad to have you here. Hopefully people enjoy hearing about what we have to talk about with Christmas in the Hills and with everything going on in Hot Springs, and then also the Hot Springs Theater and everything you've been involved in over the last several years, because you're a pretty prominent face in the community, it seems like, all over the place, all the time.
Well, it's an exciting community to be part of. We've enjoyed doing it.
Awesome. So I guess you're not originally from Hot Springs.
No.
Where did you come from? How did you end up here?
When people ask me that question, I always say, when? So I'm a native Michigander.
Okay.
I grew up all over Michigan. I was born in Bay City, which is sort of near the auto area, Saginaw and Pontiac in that area. And I grew up in Charlevoix, which is a resort town not dissimilar from Hot Springs. A lot of folks come up from Florida and spend the summers there. And I grew up on a dairy farm 3 miles outside of town. So I'm a farm kid.
You are.
And then I moved to southern Michigan, Kalamazoo.
Okay.
And went to high school there and college.
Nice. So then how did you make it to South Dakota from Michigan?
So I got to South Dakota because my current husband got a job in New Zealand, managing a software project for the entire country for their police system.
Oh, wow.
And I was already retired, and so I went along and learned how to weave. And when it was over with, we said, well, we can live wherever we want. He just needed to be within an hour of an airport. So he could go visit his clients, but he could work from home. So we looked around and said, well, the Black Hills look kind of nice. And so we ended up here. We looked around and found a house to look at in Hot Springs. When we saw it, we said, this is it.
Well, what specifically about Hot Springs drew you as opposed to some of the other communities in the Black Hills?
You know, at that time, I'm not sure it was the community. It was more the place. We live out on Hot Brook Canyon.
Oh, okay.
And it's gorgeous. As we drove out there, we said, wow, this is the kind of thing we're looking for.
So for people who aren't familiar with the geography of Hot Springs, Hot Brook Canyon is north of Hot Springs, ish.
Yes.
You go north from Evans Plunge Mineral Springs, and you follow Hot Brook Canyon Road out that direction. So
yes.
It's beautiful country back in there.
Yes, and one of the tributaries to Fall River, which runs through Hot Springs, goes out there for about 2 miles. We're about 3 miles out. And it's just beautiful, beautiful red canyon walls, lots of trees. And I grew up in Michigan, northern part of the Lower Peninsula, so I like trees and hills.
Yes, my aunt lives there now, and when we last went and visited her, I mean, that's you described it to a T. It's very similar to an extent. So how did you get involved specifically with some of the organizations like Christmas in the Hills? I know for many years you were on the Save the VA committee. When that was really fired up and going back in 2011, 2012.
Am.
And you still are. You still are. In fact, we have both spent quite a bit of time on the Save the VA committee.
Yes, we have. Well, interestingly enough, when we moved here, we knew no one, literally no one. And we had no relatives, no friends, no nothing here. And I said, I am not getting involved. I am going to do the things I want to do. And if I get in an organization, I am not going to get in a leadership role. I am going to just be one of the group. And that lasted about a year or two. So I'm not exactly sure. I think the first thing I got involved in, in fact we both did here, was the library.
Yes.
I am a major reader. And when we first moved here, the first thing I noticed is, where's the library?
Mm-hmm.
I saw the Carnegie Library downtown, but it wasn't a library. It was closed. And so when I found the old Bethesda church that was being lent for the library, and I said, I think I was in there maybe 2 or 3 times, borrowed a couple of books, and every time I asked the librarian to get the book for me, because you couldn't get 2 butts in the aisle.
No,
it
was tight.
It was so tiny, and I just was appalled that there wasn't a free library. And so I didn't get involved with the library group for quite a while because it was the same night we were bowling or something, the Friends of the Library. And finally then, they were ready to build a library, and it looked like everything was going fine. And then there was a petition to take it to a vote, and I said, that's it. We're getting involved. And so it was our first political involvement of anything. First time we ever were putting out campaign signs and doing all that sort of thing, and got involved with that group. And we're both passionate about education.
Yeah.
And libraries are key to that. And so that probably was the first thing. And I liked it.
Yeah.
And we did great.
Obviously.
Yeah, we have a wonderful library
We do.
here. And every time I go in there, I smile. I see kids playing chess, and I just like it. I see guys who probably, are living alone and are sitting there reading a magazine or whatever, and they're able to be with people without really having to be too much.
It's very spacious in there.
Yes, it's
but also comfortable.
Wonderful. Yes, it's very comfortable.
And so moving further down the line, so then eventually you get involved with other organizations. How does Christmas in the Hills specifically come about?
I think a neighbor of mine was on the committee, and she invited me to be part of it. I had been to the Christmas in the Hills event, and I came from a big city, San Francisco, and I went to the craft show, and I said, how in the world is this happening in this little town? And I was very impressed. So, and then we went to the tree lighting, and we saw the parade, the tree lighting, and the parade.
Yeah.
And we said, well, we could do this. So our neighborhood entered a float, and we were winning every year. And so we had some neighborhood things going on, and so I got interested that way. And she invited me to be on the committee, and I was for a while, and stayed out of being in
a leadership role.
Yes.
And we know how well that went.
Yes, we do. Not very long. I have trouble keeping my mouth shut.
So that's how that came about.
Yes. Yes.
So go ahead and describe for folks who haven't been to Hot Springs around the time of Christmas in the Hills, what Christmas in the Hills kind of all entails. I kind of talked about it a little bit before, but...
Well, in addition to what the kind of things you said, the thing I think that's really cool about Christmas in the Hills, I have to tell you, I watch Rick Steves. I love to travel, and Rick Steves is probably my favorite travel guide. He's written books, and I've used those to travel in Europe and things. And he was visiting, what was he doing? Festivals around the world. And he was talking about how these festivals were more about the rituals and traditions and less about the commercial thing. So when I was thinking about talking to you about this, I thought, well, that's what I like about Christmas in the Hills.
Yeah.
I mean, even though we have a marketplace, everything in the marketplace is handmade. And everything, there's, prices are from not very much at all to very expensive.
Yeah.
And so kids can buy things for their parents and siblings. People can buy not very nice things for their spouses and everything in between.
Yeah.
That's nice, but what I really like the most about it is the tree lighting, and you're standing there, and it's cool that people are singing songs, and the parade comes and everything's lit up. I remember a couple years ago I was running around like crazy, and I was downtown when the parade went by, and it was just magical. There was music in the park, and people were talking to each other, and you knew these people didn't know each other. They were just talking. Yeah. It was fabulous. And I like that kind of thing. I like community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's probably why I'm involved with these groups. I'm a social person, and I like people doing things together.
Exactly.
That means something.
Well, and one of the things that you and Christmas in the Hills as a committee had pushed for in the last few years is the Light Up Our Town initiative.
Yes.
And that has been really effective, and it's really made a huge impact on the way that downtown looks during the Christmas season, during the holiday season. And could you explain a little bit about how that came about and why you felt that was so important, aside from just the obvious, like the spectacle of all of these Christmas lights throughout, all the parks and the streets and the businesses and.
So much of these things are kind of serendipity. It's kind of like the accidental way we ended up in Hot Springs. And I think there were, what was it? We had a member of Christmas in the Hills, probably 10 years ago, who talked about doing something about the decorations on the streets, that they were really looking kind of tired. And then she moved away. Interestingly enough, she's still involved in a way. She helped us do some of our artwork on our posters and our ad at the Hot Springs Theater. So people have a hard time kind of letting go sometimes because it's such a cool thing. But she sort of brought up the idea, did some research, even went so far as a presentation to the council, and then it kind of went away when she went away. And I guess somehow we were looking through things, or were reminded of that, and also thought that the decorations needed some help. And so several of us on the committee, on Christmas in the Hills committee, talked about it and said, well, why don't we form a little subcommittee? We'll call it Light Up Our Town, and we'll start working on this. And so we got serious. We decided we need partners. And I think that was one of the key things, too. Yeah. And it was key our major partner was the city. And it was key that the city was ready for us to come in as well. We had a city manager who was ready. And so we presented our ideas. We had done our research, and we knew what we thought it was going to cost, and decided that it would be a 3-phase project. And we'd initially get some things in the historic district, and then we'd go on to get more decorations throughout town, and then the 3rd phase would be after the development of the new highway through town. So we went to the council, and we just asked them for a nominal amount of money to contribute to this, but we basically said, we'll go out and we'll raise money and we'll give it to you in this fund. And so they set up a fund, the council did, that was a Light Up Our Town fund that people could come in and contribute to. We contributed to it. And basically all the money that we make from Christmas in the Hills above our expenses, we're now putting towards that. That's really the purpose of Christmas in the Hills anyway, is to make it really nice.
Yeah, more festive.
Yeah, way more festive.
And then while we were talking there, you mentioned an ad at the theater. That's another project that you have also undertaken. You and a group of
another
co-owners
accident
have revitalized the Hot Springs Theater, the historic Hot Springs Theater, bringing cinema back to the Southern Hills. Tell us a little bit about how that came about as well.
Well, as I said, another accident, but it was one of those things where when the theater closed, and I'm trying to remember when that was now, but it's got to be close to 4 years ago.
Oh, it was more than that.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when did we. What is this, 18? I think we opened in 17, April of 17. And so we would have bought it in the fall of 16, and it was already closed for a year and a half or 2.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it had been kind of slowing down for a while. You never knew for sure if it was going to be open. And my husband and I like to go to the movies. It's a date night.
Yeah.
And we had heard that John Pence and Dave Batchelor were working on something to get it going. So every time I'd run into them, I would ask, and actually it was Dave, I was constantly pestering him, so what's happening? What's happening? And this was for months. And then I get a call from Dave, and he said, so how would you like to come meet with John and I and talk about the theater? And I said, well, can I bring my husband? So we got together. They had done a business plan. And we tossed around, what should we do? And they said, well, I don't know. We're kind of not sure that we're ready to really ask investors to get into this. We're not sure if it's going to make it. And we don't feel good about asking people to get into something. And so we all said, well, why don't we all just do it ourselves? You know, how much is this going to be? We did some more investigation and revised the business plan and said, we think we can do it and not lose our shorts or our retirement. So we did it, and it was scary and a lot of work, but also a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I managed the physical updating of the theater, and
Yes.
that was really a fun thing to do.
Yeah, especially kind of giving the facade a new paint job, really giving it back that Art Deco style.
Yes, it's more Art Deco than it ever was.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And another thing that was cool, specifically to Christmas, was the restoration of the Christmas display,
On
the
front,
historic Christmas display.
Yes, from
There-
1934, I think that was.
Yeah.
I think we have a picture of that in
And where was that found? Do you remember?
the picture.
Yeah.
I'm
the display.
Well, the display was not found.
Oh.
It was redone.
Oh, it was redone.
We had the picture. I think it might have been a Stevens photo.
Okay.
But it was certainly one that was in the museum's archives.
Okay.
And Dave Schnudi found that picture for us because we were looking for pictures, any pictures, and that's the earliest one we could find. And I looked at that scene up on top of the canopy, and I said, I want that. And so my theory about when you want something is you tell everybody you know that you want it.
Yeah.
And pretty soon somebody helps you get it.
Yeah.
And so that particular one, let's see what happened. I was talking with Kim Barbieri, and she was the, I don't know, whatever her job was before she became city manager. But I was talking with her about it and had showed it to her. And she was telling me that the city employees on their own wanted to do a community project.
Oh.
And I said, well, I have the project for you. How would they like to put together this display? Because we needed all the cutouts, we needed the painting done, everything. And they even did it better than what it was in the picture, because the picture had a row of houses, but they were all white. They were just a silhouette.
Yeah.
And Karen, I'm not even sure what her last name is, who works at the city.
Bingley.
What's her name?
Bingley.
Bingley. She is an artist. And she looked at the silhouette and she said, this needs painting. And so she did it. So on their own time, using their own materials in their own shops, they recreated that from the picture.
Wow.
And installed it for us last year.
And it looks great.
It
up
looks
there.
fabulous. I love it.
Yeah. And folks can check that out, when you go to the theater. I mean, you guys are open 3 nights a week.
And two afternoons.
Matinees.
Yeah, on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, and you regularly get in some of the big blockbusters, and not very long after they come out.
Yeah, it's usually about a month. As soon as they let us keep it for just 1 week. The movie business is very interesting. None of us knew anything about it. Most of us are all computer people. And so that's what I was in before I retired, even though I was a social worker prior to that. But they have all these rules that aren't meant for small theaters in small towns. So they're looking at the big boys in the big cities, and they make them keep them for 2 weeks initially. And those people have little theaters; they can move those pictures too. And we have one screen, one gigantic screen, the biggest one in the Black Hills.
The biggest in the Black Hills.
That's
we have
right.
in Hot Springs.
That's right. And our sound is really good now. We got all new digital projection system, and new speakers, and we heat it.
Yes.
We keep our heat at 69 degrees, so when you come in there in your winter coat, you won't be roasting to death.
Yeah. That was a problem for many years for a lot of people.
Oh my gosh. I used to take my down coat with me, and lots of other clothes.
Yeah.
Put the coat over my knees. But there was already a great heating system in there. I don't know why they didn't turn it on.
Yeah.
I guess probably because it's expensive.
Could very well be.
But we would like our people to be comfortable.
That definitely goes to show that there are oftentimes challenges for many of the small businesses to overcome nowadays, compared to, I imagine, how it was, even when the theater was built or over the years. The dynamics of how these different industries have changed over the years has caused there to be really significant challenges in getting these going on a much smaller local community, small town level.
Yes.
And so it's definitely thanks to people like you and the co-owners of the theater and all of the business owners who are still taking those risks, those entrepreneurs, that we get to have such nice things in our small towns like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, a library like we have.
Yes.
And which is really a community kind of center. And, the theater, I don't think that somebody who was trying to make money would have bought that. There were way too many risks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's an old building that hadn't been updated in a long time. We have some very interesting things that we found as we did that updating. But yeah, we get movies right away. We encourage people to wait that little bit, just a few weeks, and we'll have it. And we try to get everything that is a blockbuster, unless keeping in mind who our audience is.
Right.
They don't necessarily want to see
a hard R.
Action
film.
Yes, we've had a few R-rated films, but we've been very careful about
Mm-hmm.
choosing those. Things like Wind River, which was a fabulous movie, and needed to be rated that. I mean, it wouldn't have been the story that it was had they cleaned it up a little more.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have made
It wouldn't
any
have been
sense.
as effective.
No, not at all. But we've been careful about those, and
Good.
our audience has responded for the most part. Every once in a while, we guess wrong. But yeah, and the thing about it is that we find that we're not really in the movie business. We're in the concessions business because of the way that the studios operate. They take a huge percentage of the tickets, the ticket money. And so we really encourage people to think about popcorn and
candy and
candy
drinks
and soda for your dessert if you're going out to dinner
Exactly.
beforehand. Save a little room.
Exactly.
And we try to keep those prices down. So
Yes, it's very affordable, not
Very.
only at the concession stand, but also at the box office.
Yes. You can definitely bring your whole family to see a movie for probably what it would cost you just for the tickets and concessions for two people in Rapid. And that doesn't count the time you spend on the road and the gas you have to spend
Absolutely.
to go there. So if you can just wait that little bit, we'd be happy to see you.
Exactly. Well, thank you for sitting down with me, Karen. It's so appreciated, everything that you do and everything you're involved with. Is there anything else you want folks to know? Christmas in the Hills is coming up this weekend.
Yeah, it's this weekend. That's what I want them to know.
And
be sure and come down and see the parade.
This will be
I think
coming
it's
out
gonna
on
be
Friday.
fabulous. Yeah,
So.
parade will be on Friday. The marketplace is on Sunday, and the
Saturday.
Saturday, and the concert is on Saturday night.
Saturday
and
night.
if you haven't been to that concert, this is our third year of having the concert similar to what it is this year. And we had standing room only, I think, the first year of those three. And we'll try very hard for those people who don't get here on time to find them a seat this year. But I'd come early and stake out your seat. It's really good.
Good.
And then Sunday is the tea.
The high tea at Pine Hills.
Yes, at Pine Hills.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for coming on.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
I always like to talk about hot springs.